The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a universe of contained light and whispered power. Crystal chandeliers dripped diamonds of manufactured starlight onto a sea of bespoke suits and couture gowns. The air, chilled to a precise 68 degrees, hummed with the quiet, predatory energy of New York's financial and social elite. It was a room where fortunes were made and reputations unmade over a glass of vintage champagne. At the center of this universe, standing on a softly lit stage, was Dr. Eris Thorne. To the world, she was an enigma, a ghost who materialized only at events like this one, the annual Lumina Foundation Gala, which she herself had endowed. They knew her as a reclusive philanthropist, the benefactor behind dozens of veteran support programs, educational scholarships, and medical research grants. Her face, framed by a severe, elegant cut of silvering hair, was serene, almost unnervingly composed. She wore a simple, high-necked gown of midnight blue that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it, making her a point of stillness in the glittering chaos. And so, the presenter, a silver-haired senator, boomed into the microphone, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity, for a lifetime of selfless dedication to the betterment of society, for her unwavering commitment to those who have served and sacrificed. The Lumina Foundation is proud to present this year's Lifetime Achievement Award to its founder, its guiding star, Dr. Eris Thorne. A wave of polite, percussive applause washed over the room. Eris inclined her head, a small, practiced smile touching her lips as she accepted the heavy crystal award. The weight felt foreign in her hands, a stark contrast to the familiar, balanced weight of other tools she had once wielded. She stepped toward the microphone, the audience settling into an expectant hush. They leaned in, eager for a rare glimpse into the mind of the woman who moved millions of dollars with the stroke of a pen, but never gave interviews. "Thank you, Senator." Her voice was low and measured, carrying a quiet authority that commanded attention without demanding it. "To the board, to our patrons, your generosity is the engine of our work. True service is not performed on a stage like this one. It is performed in quiet clinics, in classrooms, in the hearts of those who refuse to let the darkness win. This award belongs to them." She kept her remarks brief, elegant, and impersonal. She was a master of the curated public persona, a fortress of calm with no visible cracks. As the applause rose again, she stepped back, preparing to cede the stage. That was when the disturbance began. It wasn't a shout, but a shift in the room's energy, a ripple of murmurs starting from the back. A figure was moving through the crowd, not pushing, but parting it with an aura of absolute, unassailable confidence. The senator on stage frowned, about to signal security. But then he recognized the man, and his expression softened into one of deference. Julian Croft strode toward the stage as if he owned the very air in the ballroom. He was handsome in the predatory way of a hawk, sharp features, eyes the color of a winter sky, and a smile that was a masterpiece of corporate engineering. His tuxedo was tailored with surgical precision, a dark armor that broadcast his status as a titan of industry, a man who acquired companies the way other men acquired art. He reached the steps of the stage and paused, his gaze locking onto Eris. The applause faltered, dying into a confused, intrigued silence. Croft's smile widened. He wasn't addressing the audience. He was addressing her alone. Yet he held every person in the room captive. "Dr. Thorne, Eris. A truly inspiring speech," he said, his voice a smooth, baritone hum amplified by the room's acoustics. So humble, so dedicated to helping those who have fallen through the cracks. He took a step up, then another, his movements slow and deliberate. He was a shark, circling. Eris's expression remained placid, her posture unchanged, but a stillness had settled over her, a focus so intense it was almost a physical force. She watched him, her eyes dark and unreadable. "A Lifetime Achievement Award," Croft continued, now standing beside her on the stage. The scent of his expensive cologne, a subtle invasion of her space. He gestured to the crystal trophy in her hands. "For all the good you've done." It makes one wonder about the projects that weren't such a success, the ones that don't end up in a glossy annual report. The room was now utterly silent. The air crackled. This was not on the program. This was a violation of the unspoken rules of their world. A social sledgehammer taken to a carefully constructed evening. Croft leaned closer to the microphone, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, almost intimate tone. Yet it carried to every corner of the ballroom. "We all have them. Of course. Past projects that didn't go as planned. It's a shame when collateral damage becomes a matter of public record, isn't it?" He looked directly at Eris, and for the first time, his smile was gone. His eyes held the flat, predatory gleam of a killer. He spoke a single, coded phrase, a string of words that meant nothing to the hundreds of powerful people watching. But to Eris, they were a key turning in a lock that had been sealed for 2 decades. "Tell me, Doctor, do the nightingales still sing in Kandahar?" The impact was invisible, but devastating. For a split second, a flicker of something ancient and violent passed through Eris's eyes. The memory hit her like a physical blow, the scent of dust and cordite. The high, thin sound of a child's cry cut short, the broken notes of a music box playing a lullaby. Nightingale, the operation's code name. A name she hadn't heard spoken aloud since she'd buried it under a new identity and a mountain of charitable works. The audience saw nothing but a man making a strange, vaguely inappropriate comment. They saw a woman standing perfectly still, but Eris felt the floor drop out from beneath her. He knew. This man, this corporate raider with the perfect smile, somehow knew her deepest, most guarded secret. This wasn't a random act of social aggression. It was a targeted strike, a declaration of war. Her reaction was the most terrifying thing in the room. She did not gasp. She did not flush with anger or shame. The faint, polite smile simply vanished from her lips. Her face became a mask of unnerving calm. She turned her head slowly to look at Julian Croft, and the temperature on the stage seemed to drop 10 degrees. The quiet philanthropist was gone, and in her place stood something else. Something cold and precise and ancient. She leaned into the microphone, her voice no louder than before, but sharpened to a razor's edge. "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage. Mr. Croft, I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Her composure was absolute, a shield of impenetrable ice. It was a dismissal so total, so contemptuous, that it left Croft's calculated strike hanging in the air, suddenly looking clumsy and brutish. He had expected a crack in her armor, a flicker of fear. He had found nothing but polished steel. For a moment, he seemed taken aback, his own composure wavering. Eris then turned her back on him, a gesture of supreme disregard, and addressed the stunned senator. "Thank you again for this honor, and thank you all for your support." With that, she walked off the stage, moving with a fluid, deliberate grace, leaving Julian Croft standing alone in the spotlight. The ballroom erupted in a cacophony of confused whispers. Who was he? What did he mean? But the most pressing question hung unspoken in the air. A phantom that followed Eris as she disappeared through a side exit. Who and what was Dr. Eris Thorne? The house was a fortress disguised as minimalist architecture. tucked away in a quiet, wooded corner of upstate New York. It was all clean lines, glass walls, and poured concrete. From the outside, it looked like a piece of modern art. From the inside, it was a sanctuary engineered for absolute security and control. The windows were ballistic glass. The grounds were a web of seismic sensors and thermal imaging cameras. There was no clutter, no sentimentality. Every object had a purpose. The books on the shelves were arranged by subject, then alphabetically. The kitchen knives were aligned in their block with military precision. It was the home of a mind that craved order as a defense against chaos. Oris moved through the silent house. The midnight blue gown, now replaced by simple gray sweats. The crystal award from the gala sat on the polished concrete floor of her study. An alien object in a sterile environment. She stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, looking out into the impenetrable darkness of the surrounding woods. The reflection staring back at her was a stranger's. For 20 years, she had been Dr. Thorne, the philanthropist, the woman who wrote checks, sat on boards, and existed as a name on a letterhead, a quiet, useful ghost. Julian Croft had just resurrected the other woman, the one she had tried to kill and bury. Her hand trembled slightly, and she clenched it into a fist, forcing the tremor to stop. Discipline, control. They were the cornerstones of her survival. She walked to a keypad on the wall, disguised as a light switch, and entered a 16-digit code. A section of the concrete wall slid back with a whisper of hydraulics, revealing a steel door. A biometric scanner glowed green as she pressed her thumb against it. The room beyond was her true sanctuary. It was a temperature-controlled vault, her personal archive. But it held no photo albums or family heirlooms. It held her past, hard drives, encrypted files, satellite phones, and, in a locked case, the tools of her former trade. She ran a hand over the cold steel of the case, the muscle memory still sharp, still present. Do the nightingales still sing in Kandahar? The words echoed in the sterile silence. He had chosen them with surgical precision. Kandahar, Operation Nightingale, the mission that had broken her, the mission that ended her career and began her exile. A Black Ops assignment gone catastrophically wrong. The official report was a masterpiece of sanitized fiction, a successful strike against a high-value target. The reality was a horror she relived every night in the sweat-soaked darkness of her bed. Faulty intelligence. A civilian compound mistaken for an insurgent safehouse. The collateral damage. Her nightmares had a soundtrack: the high, keening wail of a mother who had just lost everything. They had a smell: dust, wood smoke, and blood. And they had a face: a little girl with wide, dark eyes, clutching a small, carved wooden bird. A nightingale. How did Croft know the mission was buried under so many layers of classification that it barely existed? The official records were sealed. The other members of her unit were either dead or ghosts like her, scattered to the wind under new identities. She sat down at the terminal in the vault and began to type. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing encrypted networks she hadn't touched in years. She pulled up everything she could find on Julian Croft. The public profile was formidable. A self-made billionaire, CEO of Croft Acquisitions, a firm notorious for its brutal, hostile takeovers. He was a predator who devoured weaker companies, stripped them for parts, and moved on, leaving thousands of ruined lives in his wake. He was powerful, connected, and utterly ruthless. But there was nothing in his public history, his education at Wharton, his first ventures in tech, his meteoric rise that connected to the dusty, bloody plains of Afghanistan. The search was a dead end. She leaned back, the sterile air of the vault feeling suffocating. She needed another way in. She needed eyes and ears in a world she had long since abandoned. She picked up a satellite phone, its weight a familiar burden in her palm, and dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang 4 times before a voice, rough with sleep and suspicion, answered. "This number is no longer in service." "It's a good thing I'm not the phone company." "Marcus," Eris said, her voice even. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, a sigh. "Aris. It's been, what, a decade?" 12 years, she corrected automatically. "I always figured no news was good news from you," Marcus Vance said. He had been her unit's tech wizard, a genius who could pull ghosts out of the machine. Now, he ran a high-end cybersecurity firm in Seattle, a legitimate and highly profitable version of his old job. "Don't tell me you're calling to catch up." "I need information. Marcus. Everything you can find on a man named Julian Croft. The corporate raider. He's on the cover of Forbes this month. What do you need me for? Google him." "I need what isn't on Google," Eris said. "I need the real story. Bank records, travel manifests, encrypted communications, his entire digital footprint, from the day he was born." Marcus whistled softly. "That's a deep dive, the kind that gets people visited by men in dark suits. What did he do to you?" "He knows about Nightingale." The line went silent again. This time, the silence was heavier, freighted with shared memory. Marcus had been the one on comms that night, the one who had relayed the faulty intelligence from command. He carried his own scars from that mission. "That's not possible," he finally whispered. "The records were scrubbed. We were scrubbed." He stood on a stage tonight, in front of 500 people, and asked me if the nightingales still sing in Kandahar, Aris stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "Okay," Marcus said, his tone shifting from disbelief to cold professionalism. The soldier in him was awake now. "Okay, I'll start digging. But Eris, be careful. A guy like Croft doesn't make a move like that unless he's got a bigger game planned. He didn't just embarrass you. He put a target on your back." "The target has been there for 20 years. Marcus," Eris replied, her gaze drifting to the locked gun case. "He just reminded me it exists." She ended the call and returned to the main house. Sleep would be impossible. The ghosts of Kandahar were awake and walking the halls of her silent, orderly home. Croft had done more than humiliate her. He had shattered the carefully constructed peace she had spent 2 decades building. He had declared war, and she understood, with a grim and chilling certainty, that this was a war she could not win by writing checks or endowing charities. She would have to fight it with the skills she had prayed she would never have to use again. The skills of the woman she used to be. The first strike came 3 days later. It was not aimed at her directly, but at the heart of her carefully constructed world. Eris was in a video conference with the board of the St. Michael's Foundation, her flagship charity, which provided cutting-edge prosthetics and mental health services for wounded veterans. It was the one part of her philanthropic work she managed personally, the part that was most deeply tied to her penance. David Chen, the foundation's director and an old friend, looked haggard on the screen. "I don't understand it." "Eris, our accounts have been frozen. The SEC just served us with a notice of investigation for financial misconduct. They're alleging money laundering." The words were absurd. The foundation's books were immaculate, audited quarterly by one of the top firms in the country. They're citing a series of anonymous donations routed through offshore accounts. David continued, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Donations we never received. The transactions are fabricated, but the digital trail is perfect. It's designed to look like we've been washing money for years. Eris felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This was Croft's work. It had his fingerprints all over it, sophisticated, brutal, and aimed at the place she was most vulnerable. He wasn't attacking her fortune. He was attacking her legacy, her attempt at redemption. Our lines of credit are suspended. Another board member added, "We have veterans scheduled for surgery this week. PTSD counseling sessions booked for the next 6 months. If we can't access our funds, we'll have to shut down operations by the end of the month." The faces on the screen were a mixture of panic and disbelief. These were good people, civilians who understood balance sheets and fundraising, not covert warfare. "I will handle this," Aris said, her voice a bedrock of calm in their sea of anxiety. "David, send me everything the SEC sent you. I will make some calls. Operations will not be shut down. I give you my word." She ended the call, the placid mask of Dr. Thorne firmly in place. But inside, a cold fury was building. He had crossed a line. He had targeted the soldiers, the very people she had dedicated her life to helping as a way to atone for the ones she had failed. Her first call was to her lawyer, a shark named Elias Vance, no relation to Marcus, who specialized in corporate litigation. Elias was the best, a man who could find loopholes in a solid steel wall. An hour later, he called back, his voice grim. "This is bad, Eris. The case they've built is airtight on the surface. The digital evidence is flawless. I've seen this kind of work before. It's a signature of the legal team at Croft Acquisitions. They don't just beat you, they annihilate you. They salt the earth so nothing can grow again." "Can you fight it?" Eris asked. "Fight it? Sure. We can file motions, challenge the evidence. It will take months, maybe years. The foundation will be bled dry by legal fees long before we ever see the inside of a courtroom. By the time we prove your innocence, St. Michael's will be a memory." The second call came from Marcus. "I've got something," he said, his voice tight. "Croft's financials are a fortress, but I found a back door. He's been moving money, massive amounts, into a series of shell corporations. The money trail leads to one man, Senator Thompson." The name landed like a stone. Senator Thompson, the same man who had presented her with the award at the gala, the man who sat on the Senate Finance Committee, the very committee that oversaw the SEC. "It's a classic influence campaign," Marcus explained. "Croft has been funding Thompson's career for years. Thompson, in return, pulls strings at the regulatory agencies. The SEC investigation into your foundation didn't come from a concerned whistleblower, Eris. It was ordered from the top down." This was the first obstacle. She had tried to fight on their turf, using their rules lawyers, courts, due process, and she had been checkmated before the game had even begun. Croft's influence was not a line, it was a web, intricate and invisible, ensnaring everything from politicians to federal agencies. He didn't need to break the law. He owned the men who wrote and enforced it. Eris stood in her silent study, the pieces clicking into place. Croft had not just declared war, he had chosen the battlefield, and it was one where she could not win. He was using the systems of the modern world law, finance, politics, as weapons against her. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the window, the face of Dr. Thorne, the philanthropist, looked back at her, looking weak and helpless. That woman was useless now. That woman was a liability. She walked back to the hidden vault and opened the steel door. This time, she didn't hesitate. She opened the long, locked case. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was not a weapon, but a suite of sophisticated surveillance equipment, a long-range listening device, micro cameras, a frequency scanner, the tools of a ghost. Croft wanted to fight a war using his rules. Fine. She would fight one using hers. The world of Julian Croft was a landscape of polished surfaces and suffocating opulence. His office, occupying the entire top floor of the Croft Tower, was less a workspace and more a temple to his own ego. It was a cavern of glass and steel, offering a panoramic god's-eye view of the city below. The air was chillingly sterile, the silence broken only by the whisper of bespoke suits and the faint hum of a stock ticker displaying his rising empire. Eris watched it all from an unfinished floor in the building opposite, a ghost in a concrete shell. She had spent 2 days setting up her observation post, a nest of technology hidden behind a dusty tarp. The long-range microphone, aimed at the tiny thermal anomaly of Croft's supposedly soundproof windows, picked up every word. The high-resolution camera, fitted with a telephoto lens, captured every micro-expression on his face. She was patient. Patience was a sniper's most valuable weapon. She watched and she listened, mapping the ecosystem of his power. She learned the rhythms of his day, the hierarchy of his lieutenants, the subtle tells in his body language. She saw him eviscerate a rival CEO over a video call, his voice a silken weapon of polite disdain. She heard him promise Senator Thompson a lucrative board position after his public service was concluded. She watched as he orchestrated the collapse of a small, family-owned manufacturing firm, a casual act of destruction he completed before his lunch arrived. He was a sociopath in a $1,000 suit. But there was nothing that connected him to Kandahar. His life seemed to be an open book of ruthless ambition, with no chapters missing. Ben Carter, the journalist, was her way into the past. He was an old-school investigative reporter, the kind that was nearing extinction in the age of clickbait and hot takes. He was tenacious, cynical, and had a bloodhound's nose for a story. Eris had funded one of his early projects, a deep dive into corruption at the VA. Through an anonymous donation years ago, she had followed his career ever since. He was the only person she could trust to dig into the past without leaving a trail. They met in a quiet corner of the New York Public Library, surrounded by the ghosts of forgotten stories. Ben was wary, his eyes sharp and assessing. He remembered the anonymous donor, but he had never met the woman behind the money. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice low, "this is a surprise. Your email was cryptic." "I have a story for you, Mr. Carter," Eris said, getting straight to the point. "A potential one. It involves Julian Croft." Ben's eyebrows shot up. Croft. Everyone wants a story on Croft. He's got more lawyers than a small country. Anything I print. He'll bury me in litigation until my grandkids are in debt. "This isn't about his business practices," Eris said. She slid a single, folded piece of paper across the table. On it was a name and a date. The name was not Julian Croft. The date was 20 years ago, the day of the Nightingale mission. "I believe Julian Croft is not who he says he is. I need you to find out who he was." Ben looked at the paper, then back at Eris. "Why me, and why are you interested in this?" "Let's just say Mr. Croft and I have a conflict of interest," Eris replied, her tone leaving no room for further questions. "You are the best at what you do. You find the truth. I will provide you with the resources and protection you need." "Protection," Ben scoffed lightly. "From Julian Croft. Who's going to protect me?" "You." Eris met his gaze, and her expression was so devoid of doubt, so full of cold certainty, that it silenced him. "Yes," she said simply. He left with the paper. intrigued and unnerved in equal measure, while Ben dug into the past. Aris continued her surveillance of the present. She needed leverage, something to use against Croft to make him reveal his hand. She found it in the form of his head of security, a former Mossad agent named Kyle. Kyle was a professional, discreet and ruthlessly efficient. He was also the keeper of all of Croft's secrets, the man who cleaned up his messes and ensured the fortress walls were never breached. Aris began to shadow Kale. It was a dangerous dance. He was good. His situational awareness was second to none. But Aris was better. She had been trained to be invisible, to be a whisper in the static. She followed him for a week, learning his routines, his habits. She discovered he had a daughter in a private hospital, battling a rare form of leukemia. The treatments were experimental and astronomically expensive. Croft was paying for them. Kale's loyalty wasn't just professional. It was bought and paid for with the life of his child. She arranged a meeting, not in a dark alley, but in the bright, cheerful waiting room of the hospital's pediatric oncology ward. She sat there, looking like any other concerned relative. When Kyle arrived for his daily visit, he saw her, and his body went rigid. He didn't reach for a weapon, but every line of his body screamed danger. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice a low growl. "This is a mistake. I'm not here to threaten you." "Kyle," Aris said softly, her eyes flicking to the brightly colored murals on the wall. "Or your daughter. I'm here to offer you a choice." She slid a tablet across the small table between them. On the screen was a bank statement, a trust account, newly established, with a balance of $20 million. The beneficiary was his daughter. "That is enough to cover her treatment, her education, her entire life, 10 times over," Aris said. "It is untraceable, and it is hers, no matter what happens." Kale stared at the tablet, his professional mask cracking for the first time. He looked from the screen to Aris, his eyes filled with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. "What do you want?" "Julian Croft. He is planning something, an endgame to a long campaign. I need to know what it is. I need access to his private servers, the ones you personally oversee." "He will kill me," Kyle said, the words flat and certain. "He might," Aris conceded, "but her illness will kill her if the money stops. And Croft is not a sentimental man. Your utility to him only lasts as long as you are useful. What happens to your daughter's treatment if you make a single mistake, or if he simply decides he no longer needs you?" She let the words hang in the air, a poisoned dart of logic. She was offering him not just money, but freedom. The freedom from being beholden to a man like Croft. "I need an answer by midnight," Aris said, "standing to leave, if you agree. Disable the security cameras on the 80th floor service corridor for 5 minutes at 2 a.m. If you don't, I will disappear." And this conversation never happened. She walked away, leaving him staring at the tablet. A man trapped between two impossible choices. Aris felt a pang of something cold in her chest. She was using a man's love for his child as a weapon. She was becoming the very thing she had spent her life trying to escape. But there was no other way. This was the language Croft understood. This was the battlefield he had chosen. That night, she watched her monitors, her heart a slow, steady drum in her chest. At exactly 2 a.m., a section of the Croft Tower's security feed went black. 5 minutes. It was all she needed. The call from Ben Carter came 2 days later. He sounded different. The cynical, world-weary edge was gone, replaced by a tone of shocked gravity. "You were right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Julian Croft doesn't exist. Not before 22 years ago. His entire identity, his academic records, his family history. It's a fabrication, a brilliant one, but it's fake. Eris was in her vault, cleaning the delicate components of a listening device. She paused, her hands perfectly still. Who was he? His name was Jibril Alfasi. He was born in a small village in the Kandahar province of Afghanistan. Ben said. Aris felt the air leave her lungs. He was a math prodigy. His father was a local teacher. His mother was a weaver. He had a younger sister. They were a family of academics and artisans, not insurgents, not political. Ben took a deep, shaky breath. I found a local journalist, an old man who covered the region back then. He remembered the family. He sent me a photo. Aris. The entire family was wiped out in an American drone strike 20 years ago. The strike was part of a classified mission. The journalist didn't know its name, but he knew the date. It was the date of Operation Nightingale. The pieces slammed into place with the force of a physical impact. The public humiliation at the gala. The systematic destruction of her life's work. The coded phrase. It was never about business. It was never about greed. It was about revenge. Jibril Alfasi, the boy prodigy from Kandahar, had somehow survived. He had remade himself, built an empire, all for one single, burning purpose to destroy the person he held responsible for the death of his family. To destroy her. Eris, are you there? Ben's voice pulled her back from the abyss of memory. I'm here, she said, her own voice sounding distant. Ben, you need to be careful. You are in danger. He knows you've been digging. I'm a journalist. Eris. It's what I do. And I think I've found his endgame. Croft has been leveraging all his assets for a hostile takeover of Sterling Atlantic. It's one of the largest defense contractors in the world. The kind of company that builds the drones that carry out strikes like the one that killed his family. He doesn't want to own it, Eris realized aloud, a cold dread washing over her. He wants to gut it, destroy it from the inside. It's a symbolic act, a final piece of his revenge. The final shareholder vote is in 1 week. Ben said, it's going to be a bloodbath. He's testifying before a congressional oversight committee in 3 days to make his case. That's his stage. Suddenly, the data Cale had provided her made a terrifying kind of sense. The backdoors into Croft's servers had given her access to his entire battle plan for the Sterling Atlantic takeover. But hidden within the financial projections and legal strategies was another, darker layer. Encrypted files, personal journals. She had decrypted the first of them last night. It was a litany of hatred, a meticulous 20-year chronicle of his rage. It detailed his survival, his escape from Afghanistan, his adoption by a wealthy, childless diplomat who had no idea of the viper he had taken in. It detailed his burning desire to find the person responsible for the order. The angel of death whose call sign he had overheard on a stray radio frequency that night. Her call sign. He didn't just want to ruin her. He wanted her to watch as he destroyed a pillar of the very military-industrial complex she had once served. He wanted to make her pay, not with a bullet, but with a slow, agonizing demolition of her world and her country's power. The midpoint had been reached. The nature of the conflict had irrevocably shifted. This was no longer a corporate battle or a strategic game. It was a tragic, intimate confrontation between two people whose lives had been shattered by the same event. 2 decades ago, in the dust of Kandahar, one had sought atonement through philanthropy. The other had sought vengeance through power. And their paths were now set on a collision course from which only one could emerge. The quiet hum of the city at night was a sound Ben Carter had always found comforting. Tonight. It felt menacing. Every shadow seemed to stretch. Every distant siren seemed to be calling his name. Eris's warning echoed in his mind. He had double-checked the locks on his apartment door, drawn the blinds, and was currently transferring his research onto an encrypted drive. His phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Mr. Carter. The voice was smooth, familiar, and utterly chilling. Julian Croft. How did you get this number? Ben asked, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. I get everything I want. Mr. Carter, I know you've been asking questions, speaking to old men in dusty villages. You're a very good reporter. Too good, perhaps? A wave of cold dread washed over Ben. What do you want? Croft. I want you to stop, the voice on the phone said, the polite tone fraying at the edges, revealing the rage beneath. I have a story prepared for you. A true story. About a decorated war hero. A beloved philanthropist. Who was, in fact, a war criminal. A woman who ordered the deaths of an innocent family for sport. I have documents, eyewitness accounts, all fabricated, of course, but utterly convincing. If you publish one more word about Jibril Alfasi, I will release that story. Your source, Dr. Thorne, will be ruined. Her charities will be investigated as fronts for blood money. She will be a pariah. No one will believe you, Ben stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. They will, Croft said with chilling certainty, because I will also release this. An image appeared on Ben's phone. It was a photo of his ex-wife and his 7-year-old daughter, taken just moments ago, walking out of a movie theater. The angle was from across the street, a sniper's view. Ben's blood ran cold. You leave them out of this. Then you will drop the story, Croft commanded. You will destroy your research, and you will disappear until my business is concluded. Or the next photo I send you will be of something far less pleasant. Do you understand me? The line went dead. Ben stared at the phone, his hands shaking. He looked at the encrypted drive on his desk, the culmination of weeks of work, the truth. And he looked at the photo of his daughter, her face bright with laughter. He called Eris. He knows, Ben said, his voice strained. He threatened my family. He's going to frame you as a war criminal. Eris's voice was unnaturally calm on the other end of the line. Where are you? Ben. My apartment. Leave now. Don't take anything. Go to the Grand Central Oyster Bar. Sit at the counter. Order a dozen Blue Points and a beer. Wait for me. Eris, I can't. My family. He won't touch them yet, she said with absolute certainty. They are his leverage. He needs you alive and scared. Now go. We are running out of time. Ben did as he was told. He walked out of his apartment, leaving his life's work behind, and melted into the anonymous flow of the city. But he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the crosshairs he could feel on his back. Eris knew Croft had just made his final mistake by threatening Ben. He had accelerated the timeline. He had forced her hand. The slow, methodical gathering of intelligence was over. It was time to act. She sat in her vault, the decrypted files from Croft's server open on the screen. His journals were a testament to a brilliant mind warped by grief and hatred. But within his plans for the Sterling Atlantic takeover, she found something else, something he thought was hidden. It was a file labeled Nightingale, Intel, Source. Her heart pounded as she broke through the final layer of encryption. Inside was a single document, a scanned copy of the original intelligence report for the mission. It detailed the target, the location, the justification for the strike. It was the same report she had been given 20 years ago. But this copy had something hers did not: handwritten notes in the margins, and a signature at the bottom, authorizing the transmission of the intel to her unit. The signature belonged to her commanding officer at the time, General James Morrison. A quick search confirmed her worst fears. General James Morrison, retired, now sat on the board of directors at Sterling Atlantic, the very company Croft was trying to acquire. Morrison had been a vocal proponent of the takeover, arguing that Croft's leadership was exactly what the bloated company needed. It didn't make sense. Why would Croft have this? Why would he keep a record of the man who gave the order? She dug deeper, using Cale's back doors to access Morrison's personal files. She found a series of offshore bank accounts, and the money trail was unmistakable. For 20 years, ever since the Nightingale mission, Morrison had been receiving regular, 7-figure payments. The source of the payments was a shell corporation owned by a rival defense contractor. The truth hit her with the force of a physical blow. The intelligence for Operation Nightingale hadn't just been faulty. It had been deliberately falsified. Morrison had sold them out. He had fed her unit bad intelligence, sending them to kill a civilian family, to create a destabilizing event in the region that would benefit a rival company. He had sacrificed an innocent family and his own soldier, heiress, for money. He was the true villain of the story. Croft's grief, his entire life of vengeance, was based on a lie. He was aiming his fury at the weapon, not the man who had pulled the trigger. This changed everything. Her mission was no longer just about stopping Croft and saving Ben. It was about exposing the truth. A truth that would not only clear her name, but would also unravel a 2-decade-long conspiracy at the highest levels of the military. But it also presented her with a terrible moral choice. She could destroy Croft with this information, show him that his life's crusade was aimed at the wrong person. Or she could use her platform at the congressional hearing to expose them both: Croft for his crimes, and Morrison for his treason. The latter would exonerate her, but it would cause a scandal that could shatter public trust in the military she had once served so loyally. It would unleash a storm of chaos. She looked at the signature on the doctored report. General Morrison, the man who had decorated her for the mission in a quiet, closed-door ceremony, his eyes full of false sympathy. The man who had ruined her life, and Croft's, for 30 pieces of silver. Her choice was made. She would not just end this war. She would burn their world to the ground with the truth. The hearing room of the Congressional Committee on Corporate Oversight was a theater of manufactured solemnity. The mahogany-paneled walls, the tiered dais for the committee members, the forest of cameras at the back, it was all designed to project an image of sober, deliberate power. Julian Croft sat at the witness table, a portrait of calm confidence. He was in his element, charming the committee members with his talk of efficiency, shareholder value, and American innovation. He was making his public case for the hostile takeover of Sterling Atlantic. And he was winning. General Morrison sat directly behind him, a benevolent silver-haired elder statesman, nodding in support. They were a formidable pair. The committee chairman, a portly congressman from Ohio, peered over his spectacles. Mr. Croft, your critics contend that your business model is predatory, that you prioritize profit over people. Croft leaned into the microphone, his expression one of earnest concern. Mr. Chairman, my model prioritizes strength. Sterling Atlantic has become complacent, a behemoth wasting taxpayer dollars. I intend to make it lean, efficient, and once again, the undisputed leader in global defense technology. That is not just good for profits. It is good for national security. The cameras flashed. The performance was flawless. Mr. Chairman, Another congressman interjected. I believe there is another witness who has requested to speak on this matter. Dr. Eris Thorne. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Croft's composure didn't falter, but a flicker of something annoyance curiosity passed through his eyes. Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat behind him. Eris entered from a side door. She was not the reclusive philanthropist from the gala. She wore a simple, dark gray suit, her hair pulled back severely. She moved with a purpose that seemed to alter the gravity in the room. She took a seat at the witness table, a few feet from Croft, placing a single, slim folder in front of her. Dr. Thorne, the chairman said, looking confused. Your office stated you had information pertinent to the integrity of this takeover. The floor is yours. Eris looked not at the committee, but directly at Julian Croft. Her voice was quiet, yet it commanded the absolute attention of everyone in the room. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. For the last 20 years, I have been a philanthropist. But before that, I served for 10 years in the United States Army Special Operations Command. My specialty was information gathering. She let the euphemism hang in the air. Croft's mask of composure began to show the faintest of cracks. He had not expected this. He had expected her to be hiding, cowering. I am here today, Eris continued, because I have discovered evidence of profound corruption that goes to the very heart of this takeover, a conspiracy that has been active for 2 decades. She opened the folder. I am submitting to the committee evidence of illegal wire transfers, financial misconduct, and bribery, all orchestrated by Mr. Croft to manipulate market forces and illegally secure this takeover. She slid documents across the table: bank statements, offshore account details, all the evidence she and Marcus had compiled. The committee members began to murmur, their faces grim. Croft's lawyer whispered furiously in his ear. But Croft waved him away. His eyes locked on Eris. This was personal now. The room, the committee, they were just scenery. These are baseless allegations, Croft said, his voice tight. A desperate attempt by a failing competitor to slander my good name. Your name, Mr. Croft, Eris said, her voice dropping, becoming intimate. Lethal. Let's talk about your name. Let's talk about Jibril Alfasi. The name landed like a grenade. Croft visibly flinched. Behind him, General Morrison went pale. Let's talk about a small village in Kandahar. Eris pressed on, her voice a steady, relentless indictment, and a mission called Operation Nightingale. Croft's composure shattered. You have no right, he snarled, his voice raw with a grief 20 years old. You, who gave the order? You, who murdered my family? I was the weapon that night. Mr. Alfasi, Eris said, her voice softening with a sorrow that was genuine, and I will carry the weight of that for the rest of my life. But I did not pull the trigger. I was following intelligence. Intelligence that I have since discovered was deliberately falsified. Now she turned her attention to the man behind Croft. Isn't that right? General Morrison. Morrison looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. He started to rise, to protest, but Eris was already handing another document to the committee chairman. This is the original intelligence report for Operation Nightingale, she announced to the stunned room. The cameras were now in a frenzy, their flashes like strobing lightning. It was provided to me by an anonymous source. It proves that General Morrison, then a colonel, knowingly passed on falsified intelligence to my unit. He did so in exchange for millions of dollars from a rival defense contractor who stood to gain from the regional instability the strike would cause. She looked back at Croft, whose face was a mask of confusion and dawning horror. He sold you out. Jibril, he sold your family's lives. He sold my soul, all for money. And for 20 years, he has been your trusted advisor, your ally, guiding your quest for revenge, ensuring you aimed your anger at me, the perfect scapegoat, while he reaped the rewards. The room erupted. Shouts, questions, the frantic clicking of cameras. The chairman banged his gavel, but the chaos was absolute. Croft stared at Morrison. His entire world, his entire life's purpose, crumbling around him. The hatred that had fueled him for 2 decades now had a new, true target. Morrison, seeing federal marshals moving toward him, made a desperate attempt to flee, but it was too late. Aris stood, her testimony complete. She hadn't just shot her enemies. She had dismantled their world with the truth. Live on national television. She watched as Julian Croft, the corporate titan, the man who had tried to destroy her, simply slumped in his chair. A broken man. His vengeance revealed as a hollow, misdirected tragedy. His allies, his investors, his political connections, they were abandoning him in real time, as the news alerts began to scream across every phone in the nation. The battle was over. The truth had been her final, devastating weapon. The aftermath was a media firestorm. The story was a supernova, consuming the news cycle for weeks. The Nightingale Conspiracy. They called it the tale of a decorated general's treason, a billionaire's tragic, misguided revenge, and the mysterious female operative who brought them both down. Julian Croft and James Morrison were taken into federal custody. The case against them was overwhelming. The documents Aris had provided, combined with a now cooperative Cale and a mountain of digital evidence from Marcus, painted a picture of corruption so deep and so old it staggered the nation. The takeover of Sterling Atlantic was dead, its stock price in freefall. Aris found Ben Carter in a quiet corner of a D.C. coffee shop, far from the swarm of reporters camped outside the Capitol. He looked tired, but the fear was gone from his eyes, replaced by the familiar, weary integrity of a man who had seen the truth come out. His family was safe. The fabricated story Croft had threatened him with was now just another piece of evidence in the mountain of his crimes. "You did it," Ben said, shaking his head in disbelief as she sat down. "You actually did it. You took on a system, not just a man, and you won." "We won," Aris corrected him gently. "I couldn't have done it without you. Ben, you found the first thread. I just pulled on it until it unraveled." "What happens to you now?" he asked. "You're not a ghost anymore. You're the most famous woman in America. They're calling you a hero." Aris looked out the window at the passing crowds, at the normal, everyday life she had been separated from for so long. "I'm not a hero," she said softly. "Heroes don't have nightmares like mine. I'm just a woman who ran out of places to hide." She felt the immense weight of the last few weeks, the last 20 years, settling on her. There was vindication. Yes, but there was no joy. She had exposed a traitor and stopped a man consumed by hate. But nothing could bring back his family. Nothing could wash the blood from her own hands. The silence that stretched between them wasn't awkward. It was a shared acknowledgement of the profound cost of the truth. "He asked to see you," Ben said finally. "Croft. From prison. He's refusing to speak to anyone else." Aris considered it for a long moment. She had no desire to see him, but she knew this was the last. Loose thread. A final piece of the story that needed a period, not a comma. The meeting took place in a sterile, featureless room in a federal detention center. Croft, stripped of his bespoke suit and wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, looked smaller, diminished. The fire of his rage had been extinguished, leaving behind only the cold, gray ash of grief. They sat opposite each other, separated by a thick pane of glass. "Why?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Why would you do this? Why not just kill me?" "Because that's your way, not mine," Aris replied, her voice even. "Because the truth is more powerful than any bullet. You deserve to know who was truly responsible for your family's death." He looked down at his hands, the hands that had built an empire on a foundation of lies. "I spent 20 years hunting a ghost. My entire life. It was for nothing."